welcome to the Olive Tree. I'm Julia Fisher, and the reason for this programme is to hear direct from Arab Christians and Jewish believers living in Israel and the West Bank today, to help us understand their situation and so discover what God is doing in the region despite the political tensions there. In Israel, once they reach the age of 18, young people are expected to serve in the army, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. For many, this is a tough experience, especially for the men who are exposed to actively defending their country, as many are. In recent years, as the number of Messianic believers has been growing, so more have been entering the army. To maintain their faith has been a challenge, as my guest today, Michael Ralph, found out for himself. Michael was born in Israel. His parents came to the country from New Zealand, so although he's not Jewish, he's been brought up as a young Israeli, and so it was a natural progression for him to enter the army as a young recruit a few years ago. As you are about to hear, that experience was to change the course of his life. I met Michael in Netanya, where he's part of a congregation called Beit Asaf, and he begins by describing what it was like for him serving in the IDF.
In a nutshell, I was the first going into the army from the family, so I had no idea what I was expecting. I didn't know what was going on. I'll say that I went into the army spiritually as a teenager, strong. But if you don't give 100%, even if you give 95%, you don't really realize it. But after a period of time, there is that slowly kind of becoming numbness and a bit of a downer, and I felt that. Not everybody does, but many do. So there was that sense of feeling distant from God, because all the things that I was doing there and being so busy and not having time, spending quiet time with Him, and also doing some stuff with sinful, and basically. And so after 3 years, you don't feel it day by day, but there is that distancing. So that was tough. That was tough. And the end of it all was there was a crisis where suddenly something bad happened, where a friend of mine in Lebanon got killed, and it happened very unexpectedly, a traumatic experience, and all this pack of cards of I tried to build just kind of collapsed towards the end of the military. And then there was those really kind of asking those basic questions again, who am I? Can I rely on Him? And then all those questions of why it happened, which thank God did lead me back to Him, to the last part of the army, which was a blessing. So I'll just say that in a general, the army is very tough, very hard, spiritually. And it doesn't matter how much sometimes you try to get ready for it, it still hits you in the face. Because here you're on your own. You go into the army as a believer, and you're the only believer usually. And then there's a lot of pressure from your friends about, do I share my faith? And if I share, they make a laugh of me. But if I hide it, then I hide it for 3 years. So there's a lot of inattention on the believer. And there's a lot of pressure also to be a light and to be a positive influence. And so it's not easy. But to finish on a positive note, it was a great experience. And I'm glad I went through it.
And it's because of that experience that you're doing what you're doing now.
I didn't realize it in start. I started as a youth leader here in Beit Asaf, and I did that for about 5 years. And I could start to feel that, or notice that, all the youth are going up to the age of 18, and suddenly it's like they're gone. And it started to bug me from the inside out. And then I was asked by a friend to help with a bit of Fellowship of Soldiers in Tel Aviv that was starting. And then the heart for it started to come, and the care, and realized that there was a great need to help soldiers. And then there came the desire to start to study counseling. I did first of all a BA in Bible, and that was as a youth leader. But then to see the need for the soldiers, I felt like I need to spend 3 years and focus on just how to counsel and how to listen to soldiers. And I think one big step that happened was I was invited as a ex-soldier to England, actually, by an organization called Armed Forces Christian Union. And there's a few other organizations there which they invited me for a conference there, and I got to see a lot of military from the UK, and I could see the huge support England has for their soldiers. There's over a dozen ministries or non-profit organizations that came out from the church to help soldiers over the years. Some of them have been going on for over 150 years. And I just felt like, let's try to get a few people here in Israel, and let's try to do one thing, one small thing, and do it right. And one of the first things we did was this pre-army program called Netzor, which means to guard or to keep. It's basically just to talk about 5-6 key issues which, as a spiritual believer in Jesus, we need to deal with before we go into the army. And those who lead this program are those who do have a burden and who've gone through the army themselves, who do want to share a bit of some of their hardships and mistakes and victories to help the young ones now. And so now this is our 5th year now. And there is this beautiful circulation of people who are finishing the army, who also have the same need to resolve some of the things that they went and the difficulties they want to actually help younger ones. So there's like a much more fellowship and strengthening of mature those who've done the army to help those who before.
Has this become a national movement, or is it just local to your own congregation, Beit Asaf, here in Netanya?
Well, this is a national, for all the Messianic congregations. We've had, we usually have about 30 participants join every year. It's actually based on a much larger organization, which as Israel, they produce these preparation for the army for religious or whatever reason, but much more longer and much more subsidized. Sometimes like a 2-year. Basically, they go into like a religious study, a yeshiva or a synagogue, where they study for 2 years and fellowship, and they become like one unit, and then they go into the army. I had the opportunity when I was in the army to be a commander of those soldiers, and I could see the benefit of that. And so I just slowly built the idea of let's try to do. We can't really do a 2-year program here in Israel as believers because we're not recognized as a faith here yet. So we're able to, between finishing high school and going into the army, there's usually about a 1-month gap where we're able to get as many who want to come for a week. We do it up in the Galilee in this beautiful guest house. And besides all those topics we talk about, I think the best thing that we learned after experiences is actually the fact that they bond together. They become really connected because they all have the same fears and same expectations, and that they're all at the same age group. And it really is a greater chance for us as a church to have a group of these people the same age with the same things that they're interested in and have them for a week and to be together with them. And then there's this bonding between themselves, and they actually help each other throughout the army. They call each other up, they meet regularly, and they go to birthdays and celebrations, and they pray for one another, and so it's a great encouragement.
So they don't feel isolated as you did when you were in the army on your own. How do you see this progressing, Michael, as you look to the future? How do you see it developing? What's your dream?
You know, I think what we have now is, I do look back and I think this is already amazing what we've already been able to achieve. And it's already, it's solid and it's continuing every year. We do have the fellowship of soldiers on Fridays, which we meet in Tel Aviv. It is my dream that, or hope, that there is everybody who has a common faith in Yeshua will go through the program, the pre-army program, that's all. And that should be about 100 a year who would be able to join this program. So that would be great if all of them could join. And it would be great. We do every 2 times a year a conference, and we invite all the soldiers to join that. So that's amazing. And there's a bit more interest of doing even more from some other contacts or other friends. And this fellowship on Tel Aviv, that is something that I'd like to see to start in other places around the country, in Jerusalem, up north, where they can meet every week and to encourage one another and to have fellowship. Because we do say it's important to be still part of the congregation, your congregation. But there is this need, and I had this when I was in the army, but when things get tough, there is that feeling that the congregation, the one in civilian life, doesn't really understand what I'm going through. And there is that need to sit down with a few people who are soldiers, who do know what the army is, and to be able to cheer up and find motivation and care, and I believe also healing for the continuation of their service.
Michael Ralph, now using his experience of being in the IDF to help other young Israelis who are Messianic believers. And you're listening to The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher. Michael could be having a comfortable life in New Zealand, but he has chosen to stay in Israel to do this work, which is greatly appreciated by the many young people he is helping to support. So who supports him? Well, that's where the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund can help, a charity based in the UK that supports Jewish and Arab Christians where needed. For more information, please visit our website, www.olivetreefund.org, where you can leave a donation. If you'd like to receive our free bi-monthly newsletter, please either email inquiries@olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, at the Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund, PO Box 850, Horsham, RH12 9GA in the UK. Do join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.